These are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Sharif Abdel-Qaddous.
And welcome, everyone. For our first segment, a controversial death row case unfolding in Texas today. 28-year-old Reginald Blanton is set to be executed tonight for the 2000 killing of Carlos Garza. Blanton was convicted of breaking into Garza's apartment and shooting him in the head. But Blanton has maintained his innocence, and his lawyers have said the case has been tainted by prosecutors' attempts to exclude African Americans from the jury and by the initial mistakes of a court-appointed defense attorney. The scheduled execution comes as the Texas capital punishment system is under increasing scrutiny. Last month, Texas Governor Rick Perry replaced the chair of the Texas Forensic Science Commission and refused to appoint two of its members. The move came just days before the panel was to hear from an independent expert who's cast serious doubts on the conviction and execution of Cameron Todd Willingham. Willingham was put to death in 2004 after being found guilty of causing a 1992 fire that killed his three daughters. Three separate independent investigations conducted since have challenged the prosecution's case against Willingham.
We're joined now by two guests. Andre Bios is Reginald Blanton's older brother. He joins us on the phone from Huntsville, Texas. He's about to go meet with Reginald. And joining us in a studio from Austin is Carter Pagel. He is a member of the campaign to end the death penalty. Carter, welcome to Democracy Now! Start off by talking about Reginald's case, why we've come to the final day and the appeal is now at the Supreme Court, and then put in the context of Texas and Governor Perry.
Well, thanks, Amy. There's a lot of focus, as you mentioned, on Texas right now because of the Cameron Todd Willingham case. Governor Perry refused to look at the evidence in that case, went ahead with the execution, and he's under heavy scrutiny, and he's participated in a cover-up, basically, by shaking up the Forensic Science Commission. Right now, he's threatening to do the same, again, ignore the evidence with Reginald Blanton. Reginald was convicted for the 2000 murder of Carlos Garza. There's no physical evidence linking him to the crime. There were no eyewitnesses, no DNA, no fingerprints, no murder weapon was ever found. All they had was coerced testimony from Reginald's twin brother and his girlfriend at the time, and they later recanted that, or it wasn't testimony, I'm sorry, statements from them. They recanted it in sworn testimony, saying they were coerced, and basically that Reginald didn't do it. And there was even physical evidence that should have ruled out Reginald altogether. There was a footprint on the door of the victim from it being kicked in, which didn't match the size shoe that Reginald wears. So how we've gotten to this point is basically there was racial discrimination. They did this thing in Texas called the jury shuffle, where the prosecutor can basically, well, the defense attorney can do it too, but in this case it was the prosecutor who can look at the pool of jurors on physical appearance alone, meaning if they don't like the fact that in this case, Reginald's a young African-American male. In this case, there were a handful of blacks in the front of the jury pool. They called for these shuffles, moved them to the back. There was not a single African-American in the first 63 jurors to be questioned. So basically, they systematically excluded African-Americans, and Reginald ended up with an all-white jury, not a jury of his peers. So as I said, he was convicted not by a jury of his peers. The appeals process was messed up. Reginald's appellate attorney ignored him, filed something incorrectly, basically procedurally barring his innocence claim. And now there are appeals in the Supreme Court and with the Court of Criminal Appeals right now. But time's running out, and we really need to put the pressure on Governor Perry to halt this execution. He's already got innocent blood on his hands with Cameron Todd Willingham, and he really, can't afford to do it again with Reginald. This case needs to be looked into.
Go back for a moment to Cameron Todd Willingham. Explain the significance of this case and how explosive it is for what we're talking about today.
For sure. Cameron Todd Willingham was executed in 2004 for setting a fire that killed his three daughters. Hours before the execution, an independent fire scientist, Gerald Hurst, had issued an affidavit and a report raising serious questions that the fire was not arson. Most signs pointed that it wasn't arson in his investigation. Perry presumably ignored that, we really don't know. That's another thing. He's refused to release the documents saying how they dealt with that affidavit. So that's suspicious right there in and of itself. He's refused to release the documents saying how they dealt with it. He went ahead with the execution. Now there was a forensic science commission who, the first case that they took up was this Willingham case. They hired their own independent expert, fire scientist Craig Byler, who also issued a report saying his was more definitive, saying it definitely was not arson. There was no basis for arson. If there was no arson, there was no crime. And Cameron Todd Willingham was innocent, an innocent man executed in the state of Texas. And that's been a huge rallying cry. I mean, we've had Antonin Scalia say that if there was an innocent man executed in the United States, that we would be shouting it from the rooftops, and that's what we're doing as much as we can. We had a rally of 450 people this past weekend here in Texas at the state capitol protesting the death penalty.
And former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor has said that, and I quote, "The execution of a legally and factually innocent person would be a constitutionally intolerable event." And that's the significance around this case of Cameron Todd Willingham. And now Governor Perry is overseeing possibly the execution tonight of Reginald Blanton. This would be over his 200th execution that he's overseen. The significance of Cameron Todd Willingham's case, and put it in the context of Blanton's case right now, we have another case where there's no physical evidence. There's a lot of questions raised about the trial, about the efficacy of his court-appointed lawyer. I understand Blanton had to file his own appeals in some cases because his lawyer wouldn't on his behalf.
Yeah, he's a self-taught law student, and he filed his own appeals because his appellate attorney wouldn't file the innocence claims, wouldn't file the claims of perjury and prosecutorial misconduct. But they basically ignored his claims, sent him back to the court that had ignored him in the first place. He filed grievances with the state bar. Yeah, I mean, as you said, Perry, right now it's an election year. He can't afford this. This is more than a political thing for Governor Perry. This is possible criminal charges he's dealing with. He's, executed an innocent man in 2004. And is threatening to do it again.
Hasn't his rival, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, who's running for governor of Texas now, raised this, saying that they're accusing him of trying to cover up a critical investigation. Now, she certainly is also pro-death penalty.
Yeah, that's true. She is pro-death penalty. She's been very careful to not come out and say that we've executed an innocent man, but saying that Governor Perry hasn't handled it correctly, has participated in this cover-up. By 2 days before the meeting with fire scientist Craig Byler, where he was scheduled to present his report to the Forensic Science Commission, he shook up the panel, removed 3 members, including the chairman, and replaced him with a district attorney from the very conservative Williamson County, and later replaced another member, and has basically said that, this is Governor Perry, has said that, that was normal standard operating procedure, there's nothing to see, and has thrown out these red herrings by saying that Willingham was a monster who beat his wife. Well, I mean, and, that's not, we don't execute people for spousal abuse. He's not looking at the facts, and the facts are that over half a dozen fire scientists have come out and said that there's no basis for arson in this case.
And on the case of Reginald Blanton, what can people do right now? His execution is scheduled for tonight, barring a last-minute reprieve from Governor Perry.
Right. Really, it, for the most part, rests in the hands of Governor Rick Perry. And as I said, this is an election year for him. So, and as you mentioned, his rival, Kay Bailey Hutchison, in the Republican primary. So we can call his office. The number there is 512-463-2000, and demand that he stop this. Really, he needs to stop all executions. When there's an investigation underway that he may have overseen the execution of a innocent man in 2004, really, there needs to be a moratorium on all executions until this can be done, correctly. We support the abolition of the death penalty altogether, but at the very least, things need to be looked into when you've got the execution of an innocent man. Well, so, I'm sorry, I was going to say, you can also call the Criminal Court of Appeals in Texas and the Supreme Court and the President of the United States. Nothing hurts, and we have a rally at 5:30 today at the Texas Capitol for Blanton.
Carter
I'm sorry,
Pagel
go ahead, Amy.
speaking to us from the Texas Capitol, from Austin, member of the campaign to end the death penalty. His article, Innocent Until Proven Dead, is on Alternet. Thank you, Carter, for joining us as we turn now to Andre Bios, Reginald Blanton's older brother. He's an Iraq War veteran. He's in Huntsville right now, which is why he'll join us on the phone and not in studio. Andre, you're about to visit your brother. Are you going to be, if in fact he is executed, one of the witnesses to the execution?
Yes, I am. It was one of the things that I did not want to do.